Good afternoon, everyone. We welcome you to the January 29th meeting of the Utah Transit Authority. A meeting at an unusual time, but due to some posting issues, we had to delay our meeting today. But we invite you to stand now and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll first go to our Safety First Minute, and Sheldon Shaw with us today. Good morning, or good afternoon, Sheldon.
Appreciate the opportunity. What I bring in today is the latest PSA from Operation Lifesaver, probably our best safety partner for the railroads out there. And this is an ad that points to near misses and to not to trespass on the railroad tracks. Just a quick word about Operation Lifesaver. We started in 1972 in the state of Idaho. In that year, there were over 12,000 grade crossing incidents across the United States. The latest year for statistics from the FRA is 2017. 2017, we're down to just over 1,200 incidents of grade crossings across the United States, which represents an 83% reduction. So it's not just education, it's engineering and enforcement, but we're making a difference out there. And so hats off to our partner, Operation Lifesaver.
Thank you, Sheldon. Next up is our public comment. Any, Bob?
We have no public comment today.
Okay. But it is apparently Kansas State Day, correct?
It is Kansas Day, 1861. Became a part of the Union. 34th state.
Okay. and go Chiefs, right? Go Chiefs. Okay. Next up is our consent agenda, and that includes a number of a grant agreement, fair contract, as well as approval of the minutes. I would entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the consent agenda of 3 items.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes, and that brings us to our agency report with our Executive Director, Carolyn Gannon.
Good.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I actually remember
the
that.
whole meeting.
So just a quick update on our transit agency safety plan for UTA. We did have the approval of the UTA board in December, and we were granted formal approval from UDOT just last week, which means we've met the 49 CFR Part 673 along with Part 674 for what's required by FTA as well. I just want to thank Sheldon and his whole safety team for all the efforts in bringing the agency into compliance with this critical requirement. We're nearly 6 months ahead of the schedule for the deadline that the Federal Transit Administration has given us, or FRA has given us. So I just actually want to thank his team for doing that. I'm not sure there's Sheldon and all them, and the cooperation we've had with UDOT as well has been really critical. I know some agencies across the country are just getting there started and are worried about the deadline, and we can breathe a little easier now. We won't have that.
Are you okay if we give him a round of applause
Yes.
for accomplishing that? We know how much we feel like that's an important part of our agency, so thank you.
Yes. Then the other update I wanted to give you was just on the Tiger Phase 2 Construction Services Amendment. If you remember, we did a board resolution based on the terms of the Construction Management General Contractor Agreement to execute various Phase 2 Construction Services Amendments. And so I just want to give you a little bit of update on what we've been using that money on, or the amendments on. The project scope is to construct a new multi-use path that utilizes existing 102nd South pedestrian tunnel under the UTA's tracks line to provide an east-west connection under the UTA tracks and over the East Jordan Canal. That was the amendment. Also, in the work that is included in the amendment is not limited to but includes the extension of Beat Digger Boulevard to the north and 102nd South to the east, installation of retaining walls, utilities, striping, signage, fencing, landscaping, and lighting. And currently, the Amendment 12, which we have, is for the remaining work required for construction of the Sandy 102nd pedestrian tunnel and multi-use path. That amendment was in the amount of 1.9 million, roughly, a little over 1.9 million. We continue to move forward. The current contract value is 9.274 million. With amendment number 12, it brings the total contract value to 11.185 million. So that just wanted to give you an update on that. We expect the project completion date of July 23rd, and the final completion date is September 7th, ready to open on 2020.
And does that conclude your?
Yes, that concludes my report.
Okay, great. Thank you, Carolyn. That then brings us to our quarterly investment report. And Bob, we're hoping you have good news for us.
I do. We'll take a quick look at the investments at December 31st. We had $281 million. Remember that includes the bond issue that we completed last year. So about $281 million. Almost $29 million at Zion's Capital Advisors. That's the 1 to 3 year maturities. The yield on that's 2.307%. Zion's Bank, those are mainly the trust accounts for our principal and interest and the various reserves that we have. So that's 42 million, 1.4%, and then the PTIF 210 million, that's almost 2.3%. The blend is a little bit over 2.15%. We didn't make any direct investments during the quarter.
Well, can I ask a question? The Zion's Bank one, I assume it's just, those are just required reserves that you have to set aside. I mean, we don't really have the flexibility of where those reserves lie.
Correct, and I actually misspoke because those funds are at the PTIF. The Zion's Bank are the ones that are the monies in and out.
Oh, just
And
the
so
normal-
they're in an overnight account, and
Oh,
that's why
okay.
they're lower.
Okay.
And then as far as benchmark comparisons, we look at the end of each month. The benchmark returns, as you can see, interest rates went down over that period from 1.83 to 1.55%. Zion's Capital was well over December, that's 75 basis points. And PTIF wasn't quite as good. It's the different characteristics. You know, the PTIF is shorter in nature, so they have a 270-day maturity limit. Zion's Capital Investors in the 1 to 3 year. And so it just makes a difference as the rates go up and down. And so we've exceeded our benchmark return every month, even if you include the Zion's Bank amount. We were at 215.
You see the impact of the inverted yield curve in October. The PTIF rates, short rates, higher than the long rates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it shows a difference.
So that you see that adjustment happening towards the end of the year last year.
Certainly, you can see that with these pool accounts. The ones that are shorter in nature, the rates will change more quickly than the ones that have longer term maturities, like the Zion's Capital Advisors. So as the rates change, one's better than the other. It's another reason we're in two different places.
Sure.
I'm impressed that though still with the fairly short liquidity on the PTIF that the rates are as competitive as they are.
Yeah, it's fairly heavy in corporates.
Okay.
And that's the treasurer's report, the investment report, rather.
Okay. Any questions for Bob? Thanks for that update, Bob. That brings us to number 8, which is a resolution section, and the first one is a resolution delegating authority for the approval of complimentary service. Monica?
Good afternoon. So I'll give you a little bit of background on this resolution. Last year, we passed the Board of Trustees Fair Policy 4.1, and within this policy in Section 3B8, it requires all of you to approve requests for complimentary service. And complimentary service in that policy is defined as free service provided by UTA for which no fares or operation costs are collected. And the majority of the requests that we have been bringing you have been less than $1,000. So the policy also gives a delegation authority that says that you all may delegate to an individual this authority. And so we've prepared some parameters for which Carolyn can approve certain requests. And as part of this, there would be a reporting requirement on a monthly basis to let you know what those services are. So I'll share with you the parameters briefly that we've put in place. A transit industry group traveling to or from a transit event or transit program event. Travel to or from a UTA event or meeting on or off site. Sometimes those meetings don't occur here. And then other state, city, county, or governmental entity events which have a transit nexus. Also services that have an estimated incremental operating cost of less than $1,000. So in the instance that it's more, that would come to you for approval. And then we're also requiring that the claims and insurance manager verifies in writing that the complimentary service falls within the governmental immunity provisions and is not charter services, which is also an important component to verify.
Do you have a sense of sort of quantity of how many exceptions we might have in the course of a year?
I don't, but in the last 6 months or 5 months, we've probably had about 7 that we've brought
So
before
roughly
you.
about one a month, or maybe a little more than that.
We haven't had any, they come in waves. We haven't had any the past couple months, but we had several right at the beginning. So yeah, I would say an average of not more than 1 or 2 a month.
Okay. Any questions though for Monica on this one? Okay. I'll entertain a motion on the resolution.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve Resolution 2020-0104, delegating authority for the approval of complimentary service.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. I'll ask for a roll call.
Trustee Millington,
Aye.
Trustee Christensen,
Aye.
Trustee Holbrook.
Aye.
The vote is unanimous. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Monica. Next item, or section on our agenda is section 9 for contracts, disbursements, and grant. The first item up is a contract for the future of light rail study with LTK Engineering Services. Mary, welcome and good afternoon.
Good
Finally
afternoon.
got that right.
This is for the executive director to authorize the executive director, to execute the contract with LTK Engineering Services for the future of light rail study in the amount of $399,673. As you all know, our light rail system just celebrated its 20th anniversary, and we have over 60,000 riders a day. It's very successful, but we think now it's time to look at it and see if there's any way we can make operational or service changes to accommodate, to optimize the existing function and accommodate future growth in the area. So the purpose of this light rail study is to analyze and recommend service, operational, and capital improvements to the regional light rail network. It'll look at a range of possibilities such as fleet modifications, headway, span of service, any track extensions that may be identified in the long-range regional transportation plans, and other potential enhancements. And it'll also do a cost and benefits analysis for each potential improvement. And then we'll come back, the study will recommend incremental improvements to the system and both operational and capital. So it was a competitive procurement for this. We had 2 people bid on it, and we selected LTK for the project.
Remind me LTK's background. I mean, is this a field where they obviously have a lot of experience?
Yeah, they performed the future frontrunner study for us. So they do, it's a very specialized field, and they did a great job on that future frontrunner. And they've added to their team several other consultants that we do a lot of work with. So we think it'll be a really good team. If you have more questions, Laura could probably help fill that in. Or
No, I mean, other question is, how does, there's obviously, alternatives analysis being done at Point of the Mountain. And I know there's also some preliminary work that we're kind of done out on the extension of the red line out in the southwestern part of Salt Lake County. How does it take those plans into effect, or does it just sort of stop where our current line ends?
Well, it's going to be phased, and I believe, and Laura, why don't you come up and help me a little bit? I believe that by the time, that those studies will be progressive a little bit, those results can be incorporated into this study as well. Do you want to,
Thank you. Yeah, that's exactly right. We recognize that depending on where the end of line is at the point of the mountain, it can really affect travel times and when buses have to pass and meet at various different stations. And so that will definitely be included. We are proposing to do this in 2 phases. So we do some preliminary analysis to allow the point of the mountain study to advance a little bit further. When we get more detail from that, we'd begin the second phase of this process so they can inform one another.
So you don't see any duplication of efforts there? I mean, you hate to be paying for 2 different consultants and come up with.
Correct, yeah.
Not that contrasting opinions are necessarily bad, but
Sure.
you hate to sort of waste.
The products of this will be quite different. I don't know if you really got a chance to dig into the details of the future front runner study, but you'll see these string models in it where it looks like this interesting lattice. It's very operationally focused on we have one section of track where all of our tracks lines use the same segment right now. In order for us to increase frequency at all, we're at capacity there. And so we really need to look at maybe moving another line elsewhere. So things we'd be considering is there's a possibility of extending the red line straight through on 4 South to Salt Lake Central. You've heard about the black line probably discussed before. So that's using existing track, but going from the airport to the University of Utah. There's another little spur that we call the ballpark spur or the American spur. The possibility of maybe using that section of track to free up some capacity on that main trunk line. So those kinds of things, and not really getting into it. Point of the Mountain is towards the end of the line, and so it doesn't really, all it affects is the travel time, but this would be much more operational and timing.
And I know from my city council days, there was a lot of discussions, and maybe that's attached to that ballpark spur, but there was somewhere in the sort of either 7th or 9th South arena about coming, through the area they call the Granary District.
Yep, exactly.
Will it look, as you look at your alternatives, is it going to look at stuff like that, or is it just going to mostly stay with where the current lines are?
We won't get into details of designing what it might look like to expand into that area, but we would make recommendations in the study that would say, if you want to increase frequency to every 5 minutes, for example, here are the types of expansions and options that you might have available to you. Based on our analysis, here are the options that we think might give you the biggest operational bang for the buck. So that would be kind of a subsequent step.
and it'll look at the studies that have been done, what Salt Lake City has done, and they'll consider all those as well.
Salt Lake City or Salt Lake County?
This one
City.
is Salt Lake
Salt
City.
Lake City, okay.
Well, any studies, relevant studies we'll look at.
Our hope is not to reinvent the wheel. And start with whatever information that's out there already, and also make sure that we're not duplicating efforts, but that we're supporting kind of complementary and parallel planning efforts.
I just had a couple of questions. Number one, how long do they anticipate this type of study will take? Like, what is the rough parameters on that?
The front runner study took 2 full years. That was a much bigger system because we were really looking at double tracking and a variety of things. We anticipate this maybe taking 12 to 18 months. So our hope actually was to start this earlier in 2019. It got delayed a little bit, and so we're hoping to complete the whole thing before the end of this calendar year. It may extend a little bit into 2021, but.
And thank you. My next question was, I am going on the assumption that they would obviously look at the RTP and kind of get an understanding of some of the development patterns in that. Do they also look at not yet developed areas and how do they incorporate that? That's going to be part of it?
Yeah, that effort really feeds into, land use really feeds into the long-range regional transportation plan where we're really matching up the land use and the transportation together. This will be starting from the starting point of what is in the RTP and really looking at operational needs for the agency, less so focused on what the land use or how the urban form might develop around the rail lines. That would be kind of an ancillary thing. Our first focus, I think, here is on how do we maximize our system and make it work the best that we can. What areas do we need to improve? What would we need to do in order to increase frequency or add additional lines? I think we would refer back to what's in the RTP and what the existing land uses are, but I don't think we're going to be projecting future land use changes around perhaps that granary line extension, although we'd look at whatever the city's existing plans are for that area. Thank you. Help?
Yeah, it does help. Thanks.
Other questions? Okay. If there aren't any other questions, I would entertain a motion on this particular contract.
I move that we approve the contract for the future of light rail study with LTK Engineering.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you both. Next up is a contract for electronic voucher or e-voucher system for the development, testing, and demonstration with Cambridge Systematics. And Eddie, welcome.
Good afternoon. I have Ryan Taylor with me today to answer all your hard questions.
Good.
This is a contract with Cambridge Systematics for development of an innovative electronic voucher software and mobile solution for our coordinated mobility program. This is a 14-month contract valued at $784,670. In May 2019, the Coordinated Mobility Department was awarded an FTA Innovative Coordinated Access and Mobility Grant to fund the electronic voucher project. We refer to this program or product as the e-voucher. In the grant application, we named Cambridge Systematics as our software developer. Additionally, we partnered with a nonprofit from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, known as Community Health IT, to test the system in a live environment to show healthcare outcomes from increased transportation, which is required by the grant. This is a great opportunity for UTA, as there's no similar product out there today. The e-voucher will include a web-based application that keeps track of clients, drivers, payments, and programs, as well as a mobile app. The mobile app for drivers and clients allows for origin and destination confirmation, payment processing, and client verification. This software will reduce high administrative costs and reduce potential fraud, waste, and abuse. We're very excited about this opportunity and anticipate the project will be completed within 14 months of contract execution. Any questions?
Ken, do you still have questions on it? You had some earlier, and
Well, I did have some questions, and Eddie and Ryan and I got on the phone the other day and went through them. The questions that I had specifically was the ownership and use of the intellectual property that would result. There's an opportunity for us to maybe even generate some revenue because there are no other systems like this in the country. And Ryan has said, in fact, just even this afternoon, you might tell us some of the inquiries you've been receiving to show that there's significant interest around the country in what we're doing right here. And so there's really an opportunity there. The question that I had about the ownership of the intellectual property and our ability to capitalize on that, I think have been answered by the sections that we've gone through and the opportunity we have to then negotiate with a vendor or vendors to take this intellectual property out to other agencies. So Ryan, you might fill in on some of the details, but the questions that I had specifically we've addressed and I think successfully.
Yes, thank you, Kent. Before we started this project, we wanted to see the viability of and the potential of it. And so within a former agreement with Cambridge Systematics, we did a market analysis and we looked across the country about what is the potential use of this. Roughly there's about 5,000 state DOTs, transit agencies, nonprofits, county agencies that could potentially use this. If 10% adopted that, we looked at those rates and what a market rate would be with that. If you took a very slow adoption rate and say you only had 10 agencies adopting this a year, and UTA's portion was just a third of that revenue, where the other third would go for operations and maintenance and other enhancements, we would be generating about $80,000 to $100,000 a year. And over the course of 5 years, that could increase up to around $500,000 a year. And that's at a very modest, probably the least case scenario. And so the market potential is actually huge. I got a phone call this morning from a gentleman in South Carolina who operates a voucher volunteer driver program, and was inquiring because he'd heard rumors that we were working on something, and so we had a great conversation. He was really excited and said, when can we get on this, because we don't have anything like it today. And then he mentioned a program in Tennessee, where Tennessee, the state, has an entire statewide volunteer driver program. They're doing everything, at least the reimbursement side, paper, and they only reimburse their drivers once a quarter. This would expedite that so that they could get paid, potentially daily for the trips that they make. And so we're excited about the potential that it has.
Didn't you say that the Tennessee had 250,000 rides last year?
In 2017, their program generated over 250,000 trips. And that's just one program that has the potential of using this system.
So Ryan, does the FTA grant doesn't have any limitations on assuming there's a good product that comes from this effort, but they don't have any exclusions or prohibitions against us sort of benefiting from that effort?
So we've met with our legal staff on that, and Mike, we extensively had conversations about that. The federal government does retain rights to utilize software, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they would. I mean, that happens with all the software projects that they fund.
Yeah. Okay. And what do you anticipate? I mean, these development projects never happen on the same timetable that the company thinks it will be, but I mean, is there an estimated conclusion time frame, or?
We're estimating 14 months.
And I would say, based on our past experience with this vendor, we've been on time, and we've gotten more functionality on our projects with them than what we anticipated in the original scope. And I would guess from our past performance that we would be on time with
You're
that.
optimistic.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
That's great. Other questions, however? Okay. Kent, did you want to make a motion on this?
I certainly will make a motion that we approve this contract to develop the electronic voucher or e-voucher system with Cambridge Systematics.
Second.
I have a motion and a second on this contract. Other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes.
Thank you.
Ryan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eddie. That next takes us to pre-procurement, and we have Todd Mills. And coming forward, it just seems you just have a slight limb there now, Todd. You're making great progress, it looks like.
Yeah, I have officially ditched the scooter finally for good. So,
Okay,
well,
well,
hopefully for
congratulations.
good, right? I don't want to speak too soon.
Yeah, knock on
You never know.
particle board.
We have just two procurements ready to go out for bid this week. And the first one is a procurement to purchase and install new vehicle wraps for the S70 light rail fleet. The useful life for vinyl wraps is approximately 8 years, and the S70s were purchased in 2008, making the wraps approximately 12 years old. The current wraps are cracking and peeling and need to be replaced. The wrap does not come off in large sections, but rather in small 1.5 inch pieces when we try to remove that. The contract would be to wrap 15 vehicles per year over 5 years for a total of 74 S70 LRVs. This will be procured using an RFP procurement with selection based on technical criteria in addition to price. I have Kyle Stockley here to answer any technical questions you might have on this as well.
did we already go through, I think, wasn't there some type of a design change or an update, or something along those lines in the last couple of years? Is that correct?
So on the SD 100 and 160 light rail vehicles, our first two that we purchased, we did change the styling to the current S70 styling. So it would be really similar to the ones that are currently on those vehicles.
Okay, thanks.
And are you successful? Are these local providers of the service? Is it somebody that has to come in? I mean, is there a pool, I should say, of local providers that potentially could bid on it?
Yeah, I mean, anybody who could perform the work could definitely bid on the project.
Yeah, we will not be sending the vehicles out or anything. They'll come into our shops.
They'd have to come into our shop.
Correct.
Okay. And do you actually have to chisel, or how do you get this old stuff off?
You know, it was amazing when we pulled them off of some of the S70s. It was like almost like a larger razor blade to pull them off because they were coming off in these small pieces, and it took a long time to get those done.
Okay. Is it, if you did it more frequently, would that eliminate, or is that just how those wraps come off?
It's how the wraps come off with the sun and the cold and the different environmental factors.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions on that pre-procurement? Okay. And you're not going to wrap your car, right?
We could.
I'm just kidding. The new communication system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the next one is the communication system. We'll be purchasing and installing that for the light rail fleet. Current communications system in the SD 100s and 160s is approximately 20 years old. This older system requires the operator to manually call out stations in the downtown area and does not allow us to combine S70 vehicles with the 100s and 160s fleet in the same consist. Parts are becoming increasingly difficult to find and the technology is outdated. This project has been included in the capital projects budget and will be phased in over 6 years. This will also be procured as an RFP with selection based on technical criteria in addition to price.
Can I ask a question on those? So the buses seem to have some kind of system, or at least the newer buses do, that say you're coming up on a stop and those kind of things. And you do and I didn't think about this till Kent reported, with the cat. But if you've got somebody hearing impaired, how do they see where they are on the system? Are these systems going to have the potential of some kind of video, indicators that say you're coming up on this stop, and so you have both, visual and audio option?
So right now, it's just the public address system, interior and exterior signs, so it does control both. So there would be a display on the inside of the vehicle as well, correct?
Okay. Go ahead, no.
Sorry,
please,
I didn't mean to
go ahead.
interrupt. So when you say interior and exterior, you just mean on the vehicle itself and
Correct.
not the stations? Just,
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that somehow when we do the system that we're not sort of closing the door, making it harder down the road if you want to upgrade or integrate, and I just wondered how flexible those systems are.
Yeah, this system would be easier to integrate with newer technology. The current technology is a DOS-based system, which we've been trying to find vendors to do reverse engineering and electronic manufacturing, and it's just not available.
Not going there.
Correct.
Yeah, it's become almost impossible to find some of the parts we need and stuff, so.
You got something against 8 character file names? I got pretty creative back in the 80s with that. All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, good luck in those 2 procurements. So.
Thank you.
Thanks. That brings us to our discussion items, and the first one up is government relations and legislative priorities update. And Jewel Bishop.
We've got approximately 42 days left in the session. But right now, not a lot has happened in the last 2 days. Things are going to start picking up with the committees. But right now, we'd like to ask for, I would recommend support for Representative Handy's bill transit authority amendments, which he's running for us on our behalf, and we appreciate that. So.
That's up in committee tomorrow, I understand. Okay.
Could you explain what that is?
That is the, let me think of it's for the background checks. For new hires, it changes the time requirement from 10 years if somebody's been convicted of a DUI to 5 years. So in our job environment, it helps UTA be able to recruit and shows a little compassion on somebody that's made a bad choice, but hopefully after 5 years has proved that they're okay.
Any questions on that one? If none, I would entertain a motion to support HB 150.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we speak in support of House Bill 150.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Bill, anything else, or?
Not yet.
Okay.
But there will be.
It's early. Okay. All right, thank you. Well, that brings us up to our next discussion, which is our 2019 annual report on our TOD, transit-oriented development. Paul?
Yeah, thank you. So you may know that Board of Trustees policies 5.1 and 5.2, that's the TOD and the real estate policies respectively. They require that we bring to the board an annual report. So I'm here to present to the board the annual TOD report and the real estate inventory. The board policy 5.1 requires that we report the findings of the TOD system analysis tool on an annual basis at least. As you remember, we presented the findings of that analysis tool back in March of last year when the board selected the final 3 TOD sites. We've included the updated results in this report, and we will, of course, if the board requests, we'll present those findings at any time at your request. Board policy 5.2 requires that we present an inventory of the agency's real property and a list of acquisitions and dispositions since the last report. So we'll get into that. As the board is aware, UTA has selected 8 TOD sites. 4 of those, which are Sandy, Jordan Valley, South Jordan, and 3900 South, have progressed to construction. Those results are also included in the annual report. Since 2014, those projects...
Paul, can I ask a question on the last slide? So I know at one point we had a party that we had selected on the Provo Central Station, and that has since, I think we parted ways or terminated that agreement. Mm-hmm. Where is that in the process of, I mean, is it ready? Are we going back to look at stuff with Provo, or how are we proceeding on that one?
That's a good question. We do intend to go back out for RFP. There's a couple of things that we want to relook at before we do that. Okay. But it is a board selected site. Now the board has the prerogative to pull that site back, but it is a really competitive site. We just need to figure out a couple of things on the site before we're ready to go out for another RFP.
So just to say that again, just the site itself is not the issue, it's just the developer, and UTA and other parties just have differences of opinions type of scenario. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a whole history that we have with Provo and our developer there. We had a great developer. We don't have anything against that developer. In fact, that developer was Cowboy Partners. They were selected before the new TOD policy was put in place. They had advanced the project to a certain point. They actually had a master plan that they had gotten approval through the old policy. But when we started the new policy, we asked them to kind of hold off and walk it through with us. And they were accommodating enough to do so. They did stick around while we worked through a stationary plan with Provo City. And they agreed to amend their plan to be in compliance with that stationary plan. We signed another exclusive negotiation agreement with them that gave them a certain time frame to meet that requirement to get their master plan in compliance with the station area plan. And just, I think time got away from them. They did have some concepts that they brought forth, but they weren't consistent with what the vision was. And then just time ran out. Again, we do have a good relationship with that developer. We may do stuff with them in the future if they want to propose on one of our sites, but just on this one, our exclusive negotiation agreement terminated because of the time.
And so are the other remaining three, are they anywhere in the procurement process, or are they just selected?
Good question. So we've selected those sites. We went out for RFP in April on Clearfield. We have selected the developer, and they have got a master plan that they would like to bring in front of UTA. That we've already looked at it with the design review committee. That's the internal group of staff from various departments, and it has received a lot of support, a lot of good feedback. So they're going to go and revise it and come back to that group. But you should be seeing that coming soon, fairly soon, in the near future. Salt Lake Central is probably the next one in line to go out for RFP. We're intending to do that in Q2 of this year. What is complicated about that one is that we are trying to put together a partnership with the RDA of the city, which I think will ultimately result in a much better project for both us and them. We're just working out those details right now, but that's moving forward pretty expeditiously. And then we're working with Ogden City. Since that site was selected, they elected to go back and do additional planning around their station. They're concerned about how it's going to affect the Union Station and how they can really optimize the asset that the Union Station is to do a greater development in that area. So we're assisting the city in finalizing those plans. Anyway, so we would like to have that done. The city has requested that we wait until that's finished until moving forward with an RFP.
What would be their time frame of sort of delay? And
that's a good question. When we were first talking, it was end of 2019, but there's a whole lot more detail that wasn't anticipated, and so we're talking with the city about that. I think they do want to have it buttoned up this spring.
The only reason I asked the question, and I'm not suggesting that we do anything contrary, but if another community were ready to go and they're not, even though we haven't lifted the cap yet, or the legislature hasn't lifted the cap, we want to green light somebody else to go. But you feel like in a few months they'd be back with something, or be more in a position to do something.
That's the conversations that we've had with Ogden. I think it would be a prerogative of the board to do something, but we've had conversations with Ogden saying that this was the logical path to finalizing. I think it would be not in good faith to pull it as they're trying to finalize the plan. That's just my own opinion, but it is up to the board.
Oh, yeah.
That was well articulated. I think that is exactly the city's intention, is to fine tune that particular area. But they know that they know that right now they're it in terms of the last one that's been assigned, and so they are conscious about the keeping that going for us as well as them.
I mean, and I'm not arguing anything to the contrary, at least not at this point. If for some reason, heaven forbid, the legislature didn't lift the cap and they weren't ready to go, by spring, it seems like at least a conversation we should have again. But
and absolutely, I think as Beth pointed out, I think they're cognizant that there is competition out there, and they do need to move expeditiously, and they know that the board does have the right, if it's in UTA's best interest. We can revisit it, I guess.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so on to the next slide. Since 2014, the TOD program has produced 11 development phases. nearly 1,000 residential units, 570,000 square feet of office, 40,000 square feet of retail, and a 192-room hotel. These phases include nearly $330 million in private investment, just under $20 million in UTA capital. That's over 40 acres of property that we put in so far. UTA has realized over $24 million in cash returns so far. Switching to the real estate inventory on the books, the real estate department is
Can I ask a
managed.
question on your prior slide?
Please.
So your return's 24.3 million, but there's probably more development potential still, but is the capital requirement by us grow at all, or is the rest really return? I mean, if we made the investment we're going to make, in essence, what comes down the road is more profit, or
Yes,
is there
so
a one
those-
for one kind of thing?
Absolutely. So for these 11 phases, that's what they have generated so far is the 24.3 million. We've put in the 20 million in capital, but we have several phases that are still ongoing. They're generating cash flows. We do have the opportunity, if we want to sell those phases, if it makes sense for the partnership. So yes, there would be additional profit on top of that. So this doesn't reflect our capital accounts or the potential, I guess, of profit. It represents our capital account, but not the potential of profit, say we were to sell those phases right now. So it would be additional on to that 25 million.
At some point, it'd be interesting to know sort of what that potential return could be, just to track it.
We could definitely include that in the next report. We could say what the net operating income is to UTA, and then what potential profit would be at that moment. You know, it would be kind of a thumb in the air kind of analysis, but.
Okay.
Well, and I think that's a discussion as well about, do we continue to do we start out doing land leases? Do we then look to capitalize long term, or do we do it on more of the short term? Let's get this development going type of scenario. So.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, the executive director, Carolyn, and I were just having this conversation. We would like to have probably a third party come in and look at the income potential of all of our sites, and that could go into our analysis in the future of how we select sites and how we move forward on particular projects. Any other questions?
I'd like to, as you describe the procedures on these new TOD sites, Ogden and Salt Lake and Clearfield and Provo even, what have we learned about the process? It seemed to me you were describing a process of kind of fits and starts. We moved ahead and then we had to regroup and it hasn't gone as smoothly as perhaps we thought it might. What have we learned about the TOD sites and the selection process that might be helpful to us as we give guidance? If this cap gets listed, we may be seeing several more applications this year. Mm-hmm. What have we learned from the few that we've done that we can give guidance to those that may come in the future that would make it a little easier to actually move ahead without having to regroup several times like you were describing with these last few?
That's a great question. I think we've learned some positive things and also some things that how we could improve our process. Some positive things that we're seeing, particularly in Clearfield, is that the process is working as designed. Doing those station area plans to begin with before including developers has created a dynamic between UTA and the city and the developer that we've never seen before. I mean, it's a collaborative process that everybody is at the table, everybody is on the same page, and when there are hurdles in a typical scenario that would cause conflict, we're seeing partnerships being formed. We're seeing one or other of the parties jumping in and saying, here's how we can get over that, and we'll take that on. Just ownership in general from all of the parties, and it just has gone so much more smoothly. These projects do take a long time, especially the ones that were selected. These are big sites, they're regionally significant sites, and so we want to do them right. But even having said that, Clearfield, we believe, is moving significantly faster than any of our old projects have done, and definitely more than than past efforts to develop that same site has. We're already coming with a master development plan within short order, relatively, of where we were before. We're going to have a master development agreement coming forward fairly quickly. This is significantly faster than we've ever seen. So on the positive side, I think that we've done, that stationary plans have helped. Now, what we've also learned and what we want to implement, especially if the cap is removed as being contemplated, is that when we do those stationary plans, we include what are called strategic recommendations at the end. It's essentially what we're calling now is an implementation plan for the city. These are the hurdles that the city and UTA and any other landowners have to overcome in order to make this site developable. And I think they were initially contemplated as being just that, an implementation plan, and that there would be some kind of plan for each of those to overcome those hurdles. And they've been taken on a range of seriousness. What we need to do is probably look at those more seriously and say these are a go no-go hurdle. If we can't get this done, for instance, if we can't get funding for a UTA parking garage, there's no way we can develop this site. So why select it unless we've come up with a vehicle to fund it? If we have to move a platform, for instance, and it's going to cost a bunch of money, well, we need to identify that funding before we select this site or whatever, or there's going to be delays after selection. Anyway, and so that's something that we're contemplating. We are looking already at a reconfiguration of the TOD system analysis tool that would help quantify this and help it so that we're still making objective decisions, but be able to come back to those communities and say, this is what the hurdle is to you being eligible as a TOD, as a potential TOD site. Once you overcome these hurdles, then you're back in the race.
I just wanted to articulate really quickly how incredibly positive Clearfield City, the mayor, as well as staff, have been in regards to this system. They have really embraced it and wanted to really make this dynamic and make it a part of how they envision their city. And they tell me all the time that it has really been helpful for them to kind of go through this guideline process, and that you and your staff are incredibly helpful because they really do look at this as a key piece of their city in the future. And that's how they're addressing it. So I just want to say this has been a great opportunity to see this, especially from where they come from in terms of previous dealings with any TOD development. So
it's very encouraging, and we're seeing that, to be honest, with all of those cities. The relationships that we've had with them and the outlook about UTA and the program as a whole is completely changed. So even though we're not going out for RFP immediately on those, the process is so smooth, and I'm very confident that we will come with a much better project at the end. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, thank you. So to the real estate inventory, we are managing nearly 2,300 acres of property, which is about $430 million in book value. I do feel that I need to throw in a caveat there. The caveat to that value is that there's a difference between how the real estate department has defined its property values and how they've historically been recorded in our accounting on the books. We're finding Troy Bingham has been working with our department, and it's a pretty Herculean effort. He's done an excellent job as of those from our department, Shelley Nielsen and Spencer Burgoyne, who have been supporting him. But what we want to get to is one source of truth. We're finding that on some properties, when they were purchased, particularly during the 2015 program, some of those land values were including things that aren't really land value, like relocation costs, temporary construction easements, damages, etc. So what we're trying to do is narrow it down to exactly what we own and what the value of the actual fee property is. So just giving you a heads up, that might change a little bit in the next annual report.
But the book value also doesn't take into effect current market rates, though.
That's also correct. Yep.
Okay. And is this study that, I mean, you were talking about that you and Carolyn were contemplating, and looking at sort of best value of that inventory, is there a way to sort of, do a Zillow kind of analysis of how much it's actually has the potential of being worth?
I suppose it's possible. It depends on how much money we want to throw at that. It could be.
I don't know, and whether there's something you can subscribe to or that would help you do some, rough valuation, and maybe you're just good enough at it. I just, as a recovering accountant, I know that book value has meaning, but it doesn't have that much meaning when it comes to investment decisions, and you've got to somehow value that current market rate into it. And it'd be interesting. It doesn't have to be exact, but I think we ought to at least have some kind of estimate about what that actual value might be.
Absolutely. I think part of what Carolyn and I are talking about is getting at identifying the properties that it is going to be valuable to know the current value or the current highest and best use. There's going to be maybe like corridor property. It's not going to be that valuable to know what you can develop there because we're never going to develop corridor property.
I think one of the things, I do agree, like sort of it's interesting on the book value, because I'm not sure what the book value is for property we own that, say, our rail corridor owns and we're not on it, we're going to be on it. We can attempt to do it. We've had to do that before. But you're then looking at what if you sold off the corridor, which is a value, and whether you sell it to the property owners to the either side, or do you sell it as a corridor? So those are things to look at. The type of analysis we're talking about is taking a look at what the current market value is and what the market potential is in the future, and potentially what, give some guidance on what to look at in terms of, is it residential, is it commercial use? Also, what is the timing of the market? Is it really, should you be holding it, or is the market ready to go now? Those are the types of things we're looking at.
Property transactions concluded in 2019 include these ones. They've got the acquisition of the bus facility in Tooele. We had been leasing that, as you remember, for about 12 years or so. We exercised our option to purchase it. We initiated acquisitions for the Ogden-Weber State BRT, the first one being the Blaser residential property. We sold residence along the Red Line, which is called the Kidman House, and then we sold the Orem bus transfer facility that was no longer needed when the UVX went into operation. One property I neglected to include on this list was 1.5 acres along the Green Line. It's just west of the Jordan, or excuse me, the Jordan River Service Center on the west side of the Jordan River. We sold that property to the Association of General Contractors. You may remember that. Again, this is for information purposes only. I'm not asking for any action from the board, but if you have any questions for me, please.
Any other questions? Thanks for that update. Thanks for the dialogue and discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to other business, which we don't have a meeting next week, but we'll meet again on February the 12th at 9 a.m. If seeing no other items, unless I'm missing something, I'll ask for a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned.